It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Monday, July 15th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content. That's so excited to be talking to Jim Jackson today.
Such a good guy.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Still searching for a great candidate for your company? Don't search, just match with Indeed. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/locked on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. You can find us on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, we are going to get to part one of our conversation with Jim Jackson. Lots of great stuff. We're going to bring it to you over today and tomorrow's show. We also have our Nemesis of the week and a new poll question for you coming up. But real quickly, Drysdale started skating again after his sports hernia surgery. Adam Kimmelman reported that first. And we talked about our defensive options last week in terms of the 6-7, but Drysdale's health affects that, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, if you look at the last 2 years, he's played 42 games. He has to play. Like, he can miss 5 games, 6 games, something like that. But the next couple of years, which is his contract, he's got to average at least 70 games. If the Flyers can't count on him, it doesn't matter what his future potential is. I've always gone on the record. I like Jamie Drysdale a lot. I loved him in his draft year. I still like him, but the availability part is going to be key to the Flyers' blue line future. Really, he's a massive part of it now.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will see how he looks coming into training camp. In the meantime, we had the opportunity to speak to Jim Jackson, who is a legendary Flyers broadcaster, and we talked specifically about using that term with him. We're going to get to that, what he thought of the Flyers season, Matvei Michkov, and so much more. We are so thrilled to welcome to Locked On Flyers Jim Jackson, aka JJ, longtime Flyers broadcaster. Welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here. I love when people call me long time because, Russ, you know what that really means.
Old. I know. It does. You don't want to be anywhere a long time, but then sometimes it's good to be in a place.
That was my goal. I'm happy that I'm long time. You don't want to be short time in my business.
That's true.
But I knew, and I'm not just teasing Rachel, but it's just almost everyone now starts with that now. Long time Flyers.
It's fair.
It is fair, unfortunately, because it's true.
So I think we've had enough time and space from this past Flyers season that we can look back on it with a little bit more perspective, even though they just missed the playoffs. And at the time it was pretty devastating, I think. But what do you think the organization can learn from that season moving forward?
It's interesting, Rachel, you say it, we've had enough time. It seems like, I'm ready for training camp. It seems like it's been a long off season already because not too much outside of Michkov, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, not a whole lot big news happening with the Flyers. So it's kind of been like, all right, we're ready for training camp. But yeah, it was an interesting season. Going into it, I thought, I know I talked about this with you at the skate, Russ. I basically thought the team could make the playoffs, whereas no one, none of the national prognosticators certainly were saying that. Few locally were even saying that. But Bush and I both thought if a couple things happen, they could make the playoffs. One was their young players take a bigger bite out of the team, which in a lot of cases did happen. The other two did not last. One was Carter Hart lasting the whole year, and the other was Sean Couturier coming back and being the Couturier of old, which he briefly was pretty good, but then obviously really slumped in the second half and then had all the issues with in and out of the lineup. And as we found out later, was playing injured with another injury. So the other two kind of faded out. And not surprisingly, that's kind of when the team started to also slide after Carter was unable to stay with the team. And then, of course, they traded Sean Walker, had some injuries on D. It kind of all added up to the collapse down the stretch. So when you're in that and you're watching the lead slip away, and when you spend almost, 200 days in a playoff spot,
Right.
it's frustrating not to make the spot. But when you look back in terms of the overall rebuild, they got a lot of what they wanted out of guys like Owen Tippett and some of the young players taking a step up. So Cam York and Tippett, I think, are the two that come to mind the most. But there are others. Sam Harrison obviously did a lot of good things before overuse, I think, kind of got to him. And there were others, maybe the young players who we want to see more of, and we'll see what happens. There were also some adversity we didn't expect in terms of the Cutter Gauthier situation, which ended up bringing in Jamie Drysdale, but that kind of turned out to be short-lived because of his injury situation. So a weird year that way. But I think when you look at the rebuild, the culture part of it was accomplished because clearly you talk about just today, Eric Johnson was talking to the media about how much he wants to come back because the atmosphere is so good here. So they've been able to do that over the first 2 years under Tortorella, and over the first year, if you want to call it that, of the rebuild. They got some of those younger players to play better, and they show they can be competitive. So there were some good signs, even though it will always be frustrating how close they came to the playoffs.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, just to stick with that for a minute, this year does feel different in the sense, look, you'll have Michkov coming, and I'm not going to put pressure on him. I'm not. We'll see what he looks like when he gets there and see what he has to learn, doesn't have to learn. But you don't have Carter Hart to start the season. You do have Sam Urson, and we got a glimpse of him, but, we all could admit we still need to see more. So it does feel like even the beginning of this season's going to feel different than last season.
I think so. I mean, Michkov's going to change everything. And by the way, I will talk to the player to find out whether it's Michkov or Michkov.
Yes.
But right now I'm just calling him Michkov. But once he gets over here, I will. You know how I am about those pronunciations.
Yes.
But I think he's going to dominate everything. Clearly, from a fan standpoint, and largely from a media standpoint. So it's going to be different in that sense because we didn't have that one player we were all focusing on last year. Clearly, he's going to be the focus. Is it fair? Probably not. Is he going to turn this franchise around by himself? Absolutely not. Connor Bedard, a case in point last year, he played well. I mean, I love how in retrospect now people are saying he was just dynamic all year long. I talked to a lot of people in Chicago. He really struggled defensively. I mean, he was basically a disaster defensively. So, but yes, he had some fancy goals. He's produced for sure. If he hadn't gotten injured, it would have been a tremendous year in terms of the points per game. But he didn't turn that team around, nor was, in my mind, he going to, because there's just too much to have there. Now, the Flyers are better all around than the Blackhawks. I do think he'll help the power play, which is a major problem with this team.
Almost anything could.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, if they can get to mediocre on the power play, like 20th, if they were 20th in the power play last year, they're in the playoffs. So given that, I think there's reason for optimism. I know management has really tried to temper expectations for this year. I think they were kind of tempering it mainly because they didn't want people to think they were going to go out and make a lot of moves, which they were certainly, they were honest about that. They did not. But that doesn't mean they can't be in the playoffs next year. You add a Michkov to that power play. The power play is a little better. And they were so close last year. Of course, they could be in the playoffs. Are they Stanley Cup contenders? Probably not, although you never know. Any team that gets in can win it. We know that. But bottom line is, I think that for the fans to show up this year and say, well, they're going to take a step back. And a lot of people seem to be assuming that's going to happen. And I think members of management have even talked about it possibly happening. I don't think we should assume that. Michkov's a dynamic player. He's going to help in some way. He's not going to carry the team, but he's going to help in some ways. And they didn't need much help to get into the playoffs. They were within 5 or 6 minutes of making the playoffs pretty much.
Right.
Things had gone differently there in the last game of the season. So, I mean, I don't think it's out of the realm, and I don't think fans should go into this year saying, this is going to be a throwaway year. and I think it will be different to your point because of Michkov in terms of the excitement level. But what I think management doesn't want is for these fans to think this kid's going to walk in here and as a teenager, he's just going to turn this whole team around and take them from contending for a playoff spot to contending for first place. I mean, they're not there yet, but I do think they have a chance to make the playoffs for sure.
Yeah, you talked about the power play there quite a bit, and obviously Michkov is going to help that situation. But
Well, he
how
should.
difficult was it?
Never know.
Yeah, how difficult was it for you to talk about the power play as the season progressed?
Yeah.
And then, do you think there was anything they didn't try? Like, you watched every single
No,
minute of it.
I think possibly, Rachel, they tried too much. I mean, it seemed like it was changing the personnel, the formations, the strategies all the time. I understand why, as Rocky said late in the year, it stunk. I'm not sure if he said sucked or stunk, but
I think we all think it was stunk.
It was stunk, but it's kind of sort of morphed into sucked
I
in the
know.
media. But anyhow, it wasn't good. We know that, and the numbers bore out how bad it was. But it's in Rocky's defense, it's been bad 3 straight years now, and he wasn't even here when the first year. So I mean, they got to figure it out a little bit. They missed that dynamic player, which Michkov is. But again, just as with the overall team, I don't want to throw this all on him and say because he's here, they're all of a sudden going to score on the power play. I think Drysdale is going to be important to watch in the power play too, because if he's healthy, he can really move at the top of that point.
If they let him be himself, it never got to the point where they never let Jamie Drysdale kind of be Jamie Drysdale for the games he was at the point there. Like that was, I felt like they needed to get
on the power play. Torch pretty much says you can do whatever you want on the power play.
It didn't seem like he did though. Like it just seemed like he was more guarded.
Yeah, he wasn't healthy.
Yeah,
I mean, the injury that kept him out wasn't even the injury that slowed him down.
Right.
He had a lower body situation. He wasn't nearly as mobile as I've been told he is. There were glimpses of it, certain games where you'd see it, but not consistently. And hey, again, I can't say we can count on him being healthy. He's had a lot of injuries. So that's a real if there with Jamie Drysdale. He's got to stay healthy. But if he's healthy, I think he's the kind of guy who can really, really be creative at the top of the zone on the power play. So you put that together with adding a weapon like Michkov. You've got other weapons on the power play too. I mean, Owen Tippett should be a good power play performer. They do need, I think, a net front guy.
They do.
I believe it or not, think Garnet Hathaway could be that guy, but you don't have to have, as Zach Hyman's proof, and Zach Hyman has a little more skill than Garnet Hathaway, but he was not known. Zach Hyman, as recently as 4 or 5 years ago, is a real skilled guy, but he knows how to go to the freaking net.
He does.
And Garnet Hathaway had a couple of looks there, but they do need a guy to get in front and just stir things up, right?
They may be counting on one of the Swedes they signed. They may be counting on one of them to try that.
Yeah, that they've had that role too. Yeah, they've had that role too. So they need that, I think. But the other elements are kind of there now if Drysdale's healthy and if Michkov is the weapon we think he's going to be.
We'll have more with JJ coming up next.
We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. One of the things I love about Indeed is it makes hiring all one place so easy because you can avoid all that busy work. I use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
We will be answering your questions later in the week, so get those in. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. Send us a message on Twitter or comment over on YouTube. Here's more with JJ.
Something a little more far-reaching. I just saw in an article, Sam Rosen's going to be in his 40th year of play-by-play. He's the longest-running guy. Now, Jeff Rimmer just retired, who was in it, I think, about the same time as you. You're getting up there on the list. Do you think you'll ever be there for like 40 years or more, like Sam?
40, I don't think. I'm at 32 if you count radio, the 2 years of radio. I'm 30, going in 30th on television. I'm six. Well, we talked age. I'm in the 60s. I don't think I'm going to be doing this into my 70s. So I don't know about 4. I might make it to 40, maybe.
Okay.
Jonesy's joked with me, wants me for 10 more years, and I'm like, I don't know. But the thing is, I'm not going to want to get out unless, of course, somebody else makes the decision for me. I'm not going to want to get out as the team gets better, right? We've been through a pretty long stretch here, a decade now, without.
Yeah, so we deserve it.
Are we going to be able to sign you to an 8-year deal? Does that seem possible?
Yeah, it doesn't work that way in broadcasting. I wish it did. I will say this, Sam. I mean, I visited Sam in his booth when I was in college.
Wow.
My roommate in college won a Marv Albert sound-alike contest, and the prize was to sit with Sam, and it was at the time Phil Esposito in the booth for Ranger broadcast in Buffalo. We were at Syracuse, and it was in Buffalo.
Yeah.
And so my roommate was nice enough to ask me. So the two of us went, and so that shows you how long Sam's been around. I was in high school; he was still doing the games all the way back then. But he's the best. He's the dean, Then outside of Sam, I think Randy Hahn's the only television guy who's been with his team longer than I have, and it's only by 1 year.
Wow.
So, I mean, Randy's probably going to be doing this just as long as I am. So there are other radio guys. Joe Bowen in Toronto comes to mind, and some other radio guys. But television-wise, I think I'm third on the totem pole as far as with their current team. John Forsland was in the league a year before me. But he's obviously moved from Carolina to Seattle, and there's some other guys. But I do take pride in that because it's hard to stay in the same city anymore in this business. And, when I got here, I was one of the youngest. I was the youngest at 30. So I guess I just gave away my age.
You did. I could do the math.
But so I was the youngest guy, and now I'm one of the oldest. And it's almost like, where did that go? I just can't. I can't fathom it. I should look at my kids and say that's where it went because my kids are now in their 20s. But it's just time does fly, and as they say, the older you get, the faster it goes. So I'm going to have to cherish these last years, how many ever there are.
Yeah. Now I have a follow up because I did some digging into your career, and you did some college football. So I'm curious where and for how long.
It was in school. I did Syracuse football when I was at school. I did 2 years. It was one of my lucky breaks was I was set to do a game in Florida, which was like the plum pick, obviously, just to go to Florida.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
When you're in college, and it got taken away from me. I wasn't high enough on the totem pole, and they threw me the Nebraska home game, which was number one. Nebraska was number one in the country.
Right.
And Syracuse, not very good in football. Now they were good for a little while between my college days and now, but they were not good when I was in school. So that was expected to be like a 42-0 rout, and Syracuse beat Nebraska.
Wow.
So I got to call the game. They still play some of the highlights because it was one of the football highlights for the university. So,
is that when they had their famed, their famous coach, Tom something? What was his name?
That was Tom.
Oh, maybe it's not Tom, but who was their coach?
Dick McPherson was the coach. Dick McPherson.
Oh, no. Okay. I think there was somebody after that I was thinking of. Okay.
Yeah, that was a thrill there. And I did some high school football when I got out of college when I was in Utica. I'm a huge football fan. So.
Tom Osborne.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Nebraska's coach. Yeah. I was
saying Nebraska. That's right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was Tom Osborne was there. They were great back then. I mean, they were the number one team. They were on the cover of Sports Illustrated the week before. And of course, back then it was the Sports Illustrated jinx.
That's an amazing win, amazing game to do. Really,
it was, and it was a miracle win. It was a low-scoring game, and Nebraska was clearly they had just beaten UCLA, and they were high on their horse. They clearly took Syracuse for granted, and we got a thrill of a lifetime. So that was one of my thrills in college to call that game. And then I got high school football out of that, but I haven't been able to do much football since. But I'm a huge fan, that's for sure. People say I'm a hockey guy, right? But I was a 4-sport guy. I wasn't much into soccer. It wasn't as big when I was a kid, but I was basketball, football, baseball, hockey, and I loved all the sports. And I followed them religiously, my teams and all that as a kid, and then getting into high school. And hockey found me because while I did love it, I was a minor league team in Utica that I went to see as a kid. I fell in love with it in person, and then I loved it after that. But I was working at a radio station. The Devils moved their AHL farm team to Utica. My station got the rights. I was the sports director, so I ended up doing the games. And so there I am in Utica, New York. I was 23, and I'm doing AHL hockey. So that was my quickest route up. I mean, I said that I was doing New York Penn League baseball, which is just above American Legion baseball. And I was doing high school.
Although a lot of great players played in that, a lot.
Yeah, I mean, New York Penn League, on the way up. But they're like 5 years from getting to the majors there.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, that was the only thing that was close to the top level was the AHL. So, and I did it for 6 years, and I did every game the Utica Devils ever played. And then I got the job here. But, I mean, it was not like I was going to do hockey. It kind of found me.
Yeah, and obviously you're most well known for doing hockey, but also baseball.
Well, 30 years.
Right.
That's how you become the hockey guy,
Yeah, but just with the baseball that you have done, completely different pace of play. So, like, how do you adjust your broadcasting style between baseball and hockey?
That was fun. I mean, I did 14 years of Phillies, and it was always back and forth, right? There was no time off. And there were times back when I was doing that, both teams were in the playoffs, and there was a lot of crossovers. So there were times when I do a Flyers game in the afternoon, go across and do a Phillies game at night, or vice versa. So I had to. It is a big adjustment. I equate it to playing. When you play hockey, you can't be thinking really on the ice. It's too fast. It has to be muscle memory from practice, from drills, from games, whatever. Because if you're actually out there thinking and processing, you're going to get behind the play, right? So that's like calling a game. I just see it and I call it. I'm not thinking that much during a game. That's dangerous, but I'm not really thinking. I'm just whatever comes out of my mouth comes out of my mouth. I'm seeing it. I'm calling it. It's fast. You got to be able to talk fast. You got to be able to react and all that. There's a talent to it, I guess, but it's not like I'm thinking about what am I going to say if this guy moves the puck over there. There's just not enough time for that. Baseball is the exact opposite. As you're playing a game, first of all, you're thinking about what's going to happen. The second baseman, if this is a breaking ball, he's got to slide a step this way because the guy might pull it. If it's a fastball, he might slide the other way. He has to communicate with the shortstop, pitcher, catcher, communicating on what pitch they're going to throw. All the fielders, where are they going to field? Where are they going to not shift anymore? But where are they going to put themselves in terms of being the best place to defend? Hitters thinking about what the next pitch is going to be. Baseball is all about what's coming up, and so is calling.
And you have the time to communicate.
You have the time.
A lot of that. Yeah.
Not as much as you used to, but you do have the time, and it's
that
way with calling a game. Yeah, that's what you're calling a game. I wish the pitch clock was around when I was doing it, but that's what you do. I mean, as a broadcaster doing baseball, what could I possibly have to worry about? What's coming up next? What are they getting ready for? So when I would replace Scott Fransky, when I'd fill in for him and do 9 innings on the radio, I would be exhausted at the end of those games. When I'm done with a Flyers game, I'm not exhausted because I'm just calling it. It's just whatever I see, I call. And you might think physically it's tougher because you're breathing and you have to worry about those things, but you do it. Baseball, you're thinking for 3.5 hours. I mean, you're constantly worrying about what to follow. So I always found that way more stressful, way harder to do than hockey. Almost all fans, when they ask me that question, expect me to say hockey's tougher, but I really think baseball was tougher. It is tougher. So if that answers your question, the pacing is basically like playing. Like hockey is what's happening now. Baseball is what's about to happen.
So for people that are looking to get in the business, what is the difference for broadcasting radio compared to TV? Like I could hear the difference sometimes, but there are many people that do both now. So I'm curious.
There are. Well, first of all, I was lucky because I came up in radio, and then I came to a town here in Philadelphia where Gene Hart had indoctrinated people on a radio call on television because they simulcast it for many years. So people got used to Gene's radio call on television. And so when I got here, they told me, just stick with your radio call pretty much. I changed it a little. I used to say red line blue. I did a lot more locators than I do now, but it's still pretty much a radio call on television. And I think that's when hockey's at its best on TV, if you ask me, because the radio call gives you an idea of the great pace of the sport.
Mhm.
And aside from physicality, what makes hockey so great is the pace and what these guys do at that pace. And so if you're just having a conversation, oh, by the way, there's a 2-on-1, and some announcers do kind of use that style. I think you do the game a disservice. I'd much rather have the traditional style where you're calling the game, give your analyst time to get in and out during play. It's not Bob Cole, who just passed away, but he's a Hall of
Yeah.
Fame legendary broadcaster.
Right.
He did not want his analysts talking at all. In fact, Gary Dornhofer, who was his broadcast partner, used to tell me he would literally sit like this with his partner behind him so that his partner would not interrupt him when call play was going on. I don't think we need to be quite like that anymore.
Right.
I want
Right.
Bruce to get in if he's got something pertinent, and I think that's good. But I still think I need to call the game because I think it is the up and down with inflection or with pacing as a scoring chance is happening or as a big hit happens or a great save or obviously a goal. You want to be excited or you want to be leading up to that, giving the fans who are watching an idea that something big might be happening here. I think that's what makes hockey great. So I think the radio call on television has held for hockey more than it has for a lot of the other sports. But what I like to tell my broadcast students, my coaching students, is that there's many differences, Russ. One, there's more money in television.
Right.
That's one. But more importantly, in terms of what's on the air, I can show you a Pat Summerall call of a touchdown and then show you the radio call of that same play. Summerall might use 7 words. The radio guy will use 45.
Right.
Because
Right.
in radio, you are the sole conduit between the listener and the game. So you have to paint the picture verbally. TV, the
Right.
picture's there. All you have to do is kind of enhance that. Again, I don't necessarily do that as much with what I do because people are used to a radio call here, but a lot of great announcers, Summerall comes to mind, first of all, and I know a lot of people, not present company, I understand knows who Pat Summerall is, but a lot of
Oh,
younger
yeah.
people don't know who he was.
Sure.
He was just so good
But they
at
can
it.
look on YouTube. They can look on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, just a minimalist and the best at it.
All right, we'll have part 2 of our conversation with Jim Jackson on tomorrow's show. In the meantime, up next, our new weekly poll and our Nemesis of the week. All right, it is Monday, so we've got 2 things for you to get to. First, our new listener poll of the week. Been having so much fun doing these with y'all, and with Jim Jackson as our main guest this week, we thought we would ask you something in the broadcasting area. So, who is your favorite ex Flyers player who made the jump to broadcasting? And we had to narrow it down to 5 choices because of poll limitations, but your options are Brian Boucher, Keith Jones, Bill Clement, Gary Dornhofer, and Brian Prop. So you can answer that poll question over on YouTube. There'll be a link to it in the show notes. And if it's somebody not on this list, feel free to comment in it over there as well. Looking forward to discussing this one later in the week. Don't say who it is, Russ, but do you have an idea of who the winner might be?
I do.
Yeah, I think so too. But
You
the
never know.
listeners could surprise us. So I'm
They
excited to see how this one turns out. For our nemesis of the week, last week we talked about the fact that it is now like the off season, the real off season, and we have
Yes.
a long wait until October. But I feel like the nemesis for me this week is really it's shorter than you think, and so you got to enjoy your summer break while you can, but always have hockey on the mind because it will be there before you know it. And training camp's going to start up like second week of September-ish, and so There really is like a short window here. And I think that, yeah, hockey will be back before you know it. So take the time to enjoy this little downtime while you can.
Yeah. My nemesis of the week is sometimes athletes need to have a sense of humor. And I'll give you an example. So I didn't even know the other day that the ESPYs happened and Connor McDavid won Best Hockey Player. That's fine. No complaints of any of that. Nikki Glazer was up there and she made a joke that, hey,
She's
Edmonton
very
lost.
funny.
Yeah, Edmonton lost to Florida. Florida can't really support ice and everything else. And I believe they showed Evander Kane in the audience, and he didn't even crack a smile. And it's like, dude, I get it. You're upset you lost the Stanley Cup, but it's a joke. Everybody makes jokes about everything. If you're showing up there, you know that there's going to be jokes about your sport and your season. So just lighten up.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, some of the jokes were low hanging fruit when it
Yes.
comes to hockey, and people need to like step it up a
Get
little
new
bit.
ones. Yeah.
Get new jokes. So if that's your beef, like I get it. But if you're just gonna be like sour about it for no reason, that's where I have the problem. But if you have like an artistic, critical look at it, I
Yeah.
am all
Like, if you
ears,
know
right?
you here's my whole thing. It's like anything
Yeah.
else. If you go to a comedy show, right? You know you're going to get offended or they're going to go right to the line of where you might get offended. And so if you can't keep that in check, then don't go. And it's the same thing as the SBs. You don't know if you're going to get picked out of the audience. The spotlight's going to be on you. Someone's going to say something. You may like it, you may not. You just got to take it in stride. That's all.
Yeah, I think the ESPYs are a weird award show because it's a fine line. Because to me, the ESPYs aren't real, right? They're just designed as a showcase for ESPN.
But
And
no awards are
but
real if
no,
we're
but
gonna get to that.
no, but like I feel like if you're talking about the NHL awards
Okay,
versus the ESPYs,
sure,
like players and fans, I think would take the NHL award of
of
hockey,
course.
would take the NHL
Yes,
awards more seriously and think about who they really would give the heart to or all this.
right,
The ESPYs, nobody cares because it's a generalized sports entertainment
right,
show and it's there for fun, for entertainment. And who wins is kind like who cares, honestly. And making sports compete against each other, it's very clearly like some sports are more popular than others. So whatever,
right,
it's fine.
right,
It's fine, but, like, you just have to take it as that, and you
right.
can't take it to the SB seriously at
No,
all, in my opinion. Just have fun with it
yeah.
and move on. That's kinda my
If you
take
went to the
on it.
trouble of getting dressed up to go to this thing,
Yeah,
then just have a good time, man.
yeah, and I would say the ESPYs, other than being entertaining, the main purpose is to highlight some of the special work that's being done in the world of sports, where they
Right.
have, like, they honor people for their
Yes.
work in the communities and stuff like that. Take that stuff seriously. The rest of it is all kind of throwaway for everybody to put on pretty clothes and have a good time.
Yep.
All right, that will do it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening. We will have our part two of the conversation with Jim Jackson on tomorrow's show, plus a little bit of news about Garnet Hathaway. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So send in those mailbag questions on Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Have a great day, everyone.